these have two applications. One, herbicide resistance, and the argument is herbicide-resistant crops will allow you to control weeds and will allow you to decrease weedicide use.
Yeah.
And the second is Bt toxin crops, which will so-called allow you to control pests without pesticides. What is the record? We've had this now for 15 years. Herbicide-resistant crops in the US, which have become dominant, have today created such strong resistance in the weeds themselves that you have 15 million acres overtaken by superweeds that can't be controlled by Roundup. People are being hired in a new slave labor to pull out these weeds physically, or Agent Orange, which was sprayed on Vietnam, is being sprayed. In terms of the Bt pest, new pests have been created. The bollworm, which was supposed to be controlled, has become resistant. So now they're making Bollgard 2, putting 2 toxic genes. And I always say, you know, Einstein reminded us that insanity is to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. Whether it be financial speculation, it blew up this country a few years ago. And yet what's the solution to the financial crisis? More financial liberalization. In the same way, what's the solution to Bt creating pests? More Bt in your crops, which will create even more virulent pests and more super pests. So it's not increasing food production, it's not controlling weeds, it's creating super weeds, it's not controlling pests. 13 times more pesticide use in India as a result of the introduction of Bt cotton. And this is the record across the world. More herbicides used, more pesticides used.
So this is what you call eco-terrorism. Do you think this will end in is this something that will end in a disaster? Or?
It is already a disaster. If you come to the cotton areas of India and see every second family with a suicide, it's a disaster. If you see that those farms used to grow food with cotton as one plant, and all you have is a monoculture of Bt cotton, it's a disaster. You go to the farms of the Midwest in the US, overtaken by superweeds, and that's in the first 10 years. Can you imagine if we did this kind of agriculture? The disaster is already there, staring us in the face. And we need to recognize this disaster. And I think it is sad that governments are not looking enough, are not assessing enough. Every reasonable government that, A, has signed the Biodiversity Convention, which every government has an obligation to protect biodiversity, and therefore not allow GM into their areas. Any government that cares for their seed sovereignty and food sovereignty should keep the seed in the common hands and the public hands, and should be GMO-free. I think Iceland should be GMO-free.
But what are the solutions? What are the ways? What are the alternatives? If we, for example, look at organic farming, which is growing, but it's still quite minimal beside what is the industrial farming.
Well, the reason industrial farming is dominant is because they take all the taxpayer money to promote it and subsidize it. You would not afford industrial farming if farmers had to pay all the costs. The CAP, the Common Agriculture Policy, diverts so much money into chemicals. $400 billion is what the OECD spends on supporting industrial farming. That's more than $1 billion a day. Now, if organic farming had that kind of support, the mainstream would be organic farming. So the alternative to industrial farming and GM seeds is open-pollinated varieties with lots of improvement through plant breeding of farmers, scientists joining as partners, and we do this kind of participatory breeding. And seed is not stagnant. Seed is constantly evolving. And you can constantly select for higher production. Ecological farming, biodiverse ecological farming, on the basis of our work in India, shows that if you're measuring food and nutrition per acre, ecological farming wins out. The United Nations has recognized this. And even more importantly, if you're looking at the economy of the rural producer, farmers earn much more when they don't spend their money on toxic chemicals and non-renewable seed. So the way to improve farm economies, the way to generate a better agrarian culture is to retain more of the wealth by not blowing up the money
Yes.
on toxic seed and toxic chemicals.
But will we be able to feed the world in this way? Like in India, you have, well, the population is always growing, and well, we've had, well, last year or the year before that, we had a food crisis. The food prices going up, and there seems to be more speculation around food, and so the question is, will there be enough food for everybody?
Well, there is already enough food for everybody. The tragedy is, part of it is being blown up, is to drive cars as biofuel.
Biofuel.
And that too is related to subsidy.
Yes.
If there were no subsidies for biofuel, food would not be going into the oil tanks of automobiles.
No.
Then you have the very perverse system of industrial animal farming, livestock farming, which uses huge amounts of grain as cattle feed.
Yes.
To produce 1/10 the food value in terms of meat.
Yes.
This is taking away a lot of food grain that's available. So between biofuels, between cattle feed, you've already diverted about 80% of the grain that's produced on the planet. And then you have speculation, where food has been made into a commodity after the 2008 collapse. You now have a food bubble.
Yes.
That time you had a housing bubble. And the same speculators are doing the same thing with food that they all did with the housing
Yes.
and real estate in America. The result of this is food is being taken away from the poor because they can't afford to pay. So hunger has to be addressed at the level of production and distribution. At the level of production, you produce more food per unit area through ecological systems. You produce more commodities
Yes.
through industrial agriculture. But industrial agriculture doesn't retain the food on the farm. So we have 1 billion people hungry today, and of them 500 million are producers of food who are growing commodities, taking credit, getting into debt, selling everything they grow, and starving themselves. That's not a recipe to address hunger. We need to do ecological agriculture that returns enough organic matter to the soil, so the soil is fertile,
Yes.
produces enough food for the farming family, so there's no hunger and malnutrition, and sells the surpluses to the cities. Now, in India, 1/3 of the people live in cities. 2/3 live in rural areas. We assume that the rural areas don't have to eat. We assume that all the food has to be shipped into cities. We also assume that all the land of the planet should now be used to grow commodities. So we have not just a food crisis driven by speculation.
No.
It's leading to a land grab of a very, very large scale, where 1 billion acres or more have been taken over in Africa on the argument that this will solve the food crisis.
Yes.
How can you dispossess small farmers of Africa, leave them to be victims of hunger and famine, and say you're solving the food crisis? Solving the food crisis means recognizing that food is an ecological produce.
Yes, yeah.
It is a produce of the land. Farmers are producers of highest quality. Recognizing their knowledge and skills is vital. I've had debates with Monsanto, where Monsanto said the reason they're smart is they're bringing seeds where the farmer doesn't have to know anything. I said, ignorance for you is virtue?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Ignorance is
Yeah.
progress. Now, ecological systems and organic farming has the potential to address the hunger problem of the world. But it can only do it through diversity. It can only do it if the uneven privilege to industrial farming is removed through the subsidies. And it can only do it if we start to recognize that everyone needs food, and therefore decentralized distribution is vital for resilience.
Well, I have here a book. It's this is a book, your writings, Manifesto on the Future of Food, Manifesto on Climate Change and the Future of Food Security. And, well, what about, from listening to you, I wonder if this is a battle that can ever be won. Is this, because
well, you know, I think morally and intellectually we've already won this battle. Because all that these corporations have is lies. For example, Monsanto says we've got climate-resilient seeds. What have they done? They've just stolen the climate-resilient seeds farmers bred and patented them.
Yes.
That's a lie. That's a piracy. They say we've increased food production. They haven't. They came with the claim that Indian farmers are getting 1,500 kilograms per acre of cotton. The average is 400 to 500 kilograms. So at every level, you have a distortion. Now, you can create spin through distortion, but you can't feed the world.
No.
You can't create livelihoods. And I think the only thing missing in this whole piece is the political will of democratically elected governments to stay democratic. Because they're sacrificing the mandate of the people to say, oh, Monsanto, yeah, you're putting pressure on me? Sure, I'll give you GMOs. I'll accept them in my country. I'll change the laws of my land. And I think what we need is just a political will that recognizes that science is on the side of organic and not on the side of GMOs, that democracy is on the side of organic, not on the side of GMOs, biodiversity is on the side of organic and not on the side of GMOs. And, you know, the climate manifesto that we've done there, we worked out that 40% of all climate damage is coming from industrial agriculture and globalized trade in food.
Yes.
And 40% of the solution lies in more ecological production and more decentralized production. And we won't just reduce 5%, we'll reduce 40% of the emissions and make agriculture more resilient, because an agriculture that reduces emissions puts more carbon into the soil. More carbon in the soil creates more water in the soil. More water in the soil means when your drought comes and you don't have rain, you still have a crop.
Iceland is, of course, a very small player in all of this. It's a small country. But so you think that we should resist GMOs in Iceland and of course, that we should label GMOs?
I definitely think Iceland should stay GMO-free. And I think Iceland should become an organic island. It should become an organic island because, in any case, fossil fuel has peaked.
Yes.
You're running out of fossil fuel and to make fertilizers. You're running out of phosphatic fertilizers. And the only way to renew these elements is through ecological agriculture. Then you'll never run out. If you have earthworms in your soil, they produce the phosphate for you. You don't have to mine it.
No.
If you have nitrogen-fixing crops and compost, you're getting all the nitrogen you need. You don't have to depend on former explosive factories that today make fertilizers but can also be used to make bombs, as we saw in the tragedy for Oslo. It was a fertilizer bomb that young man used. We need to go beyond the fossil fuel culture. Now, Iceland is so well placed in terms of renewable energy. But sadly, it's not using this advantage for its own sustainability. It's saying, okay, chemical fertilizers, you can sell them to us, and as the prices keep rising, it's all right, our food costs will rise, and beyond a point we'd say we can't do agriculture. And what is even sadder for me, is to see Iceland say we've got clean energy, therefore bring your most polluting industry, aluminium, to us. Where did this thinking come from? If it's a clean island, let it be a truly clean and green island. And that means an organic island, an island that builds on its biodiversity and builds on its creativity and puts the creative industries. Just had a conversation with the industry minister and the environment minister, and they recognize that jobs in polluting industry cannot be the future of this beautiful island. It has to celebrate its beauty, endowed so generously by nature. It has to see nature as its benefactor, and there's no limit that cannot be reached in terms of a creative unleashing of potential for livelihoods, for jobs, for meeting the needs for a welfare and well-being. You know, there's a little mountain state called Bhutan that has adopted the gross national happiness as an indicator rather than gross national product. And they've asked me to help them go organic. And it would be so wonderful to not just have Bhutan say we'll be an organic Bhutan, but to have Iceland say we will be an organic Iceland.
Well, that's a beautiful vision. So this is your book, it's out, Ákall til mannkyns in Icelandic. Vimanda Shiva, thank you for coming to Silfur Egils.
Thank you.
Thank you.